Greetings, loved ones. Today we're going to talk about how ending the victim mindset is an important step to healing your psyche after escaping domestic violence. To help us get these messages out, please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, hit the like button and the notification bell, and please share these messages with others you could save a life. The physical wounds of domestic violence often heal well before the emotional ones are even fully understood. After months, years, or decades, the survivor may continue to see themselves as a victim. During the late 1960s and 70s, psychologists tried to come up with an explanation for why survivors of domestic violence continue to suffer a victim mindset long after the abuse ended. They coined several terms over the year, including battered woman syndrome, learned helplessness, and learned dependency. They all essentially describe the same thing, the idea that after someone has been forced to endure unpleasant encounters, they become unwilling or unable to avoid such encounters in the future because they believe they cannot control them. Tara Dixon, a provisional licensed professional counselor with Heal Your Life Counseling, explains the idea as such. She says, if a woman is slapped by her husband every time she touches her phone, she learns not to touch the phone to avoid punishment. Helplessness takes over when the husband leaves the home. And although the husband is not there to slap her, she still will not touch the phone for fear that negative results will still apply. She has accepted the futility of the attempt to call for help. Her past has shown her that attempts to save herself ended physical violence, and she is now helpless to fight those thoughts and take risks. It's not your fault. Today, most domestic violence advocates hesitate to use any of the terms for learned helplessness because it exacerbates victim blaming. In an article from the independent news site, The Conversation, author Zoe Krupka wrote, like the slippery concepts of low self-esteem, Stockholm syndrome, codependence, or traumatic bonding, learned helplessness has entered our vernacular. She says it has swallowed up socially accurate explanations for violence until nothing is left but to blame the victim. This contributes to women's disempowerment and to our overall inability to see the violent forest for the trees. Regardless, many domestic violence survivors do struggle with victim mentality, and some experts say the effects of PTSD on the brain are to blame. Jennifer Hancock, author of The Bully Vaccine and founder of Humanist Learning Systems, says, the ongoing trauma, even low-level trauma, that occurs in stalking or domestic violence situations can cause PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not because they're weak, it's because they've been conditioned to respond that way. You know, science tells us that PTSD causes changes in the brain circuits associated with stress response. And these changes can cause psychological and physiological symptoms such as flashbacks, nightmares, sleep disturbances, startle responses, and problems with memory and concentration. Dealing with such symptoms, in addition to having been conditioned to think she's not worthy of a better life, can paralyze a survivor. Hancock herself was stymied by victim mentality following years of abuse and stalking by a former partner. She put her life and her career on hold. She was unable to leave the house for a time. She struggled to get past the trauma even when a new, safe relationship began. Hancock says, because the relationship seemed healthy, I couldn't make sense of it. It didn't feel right because I had been conditioned by the abuser to be comfortable with the abuse. I needed to retrain myself, she says, to be healthy, to be comfortable around healthy. So how do we get from victim to survivor? Hancock uses the term retrain purposefully when describing what she had to do to move beyond victim mentality. She says, intellectually, I knew I didn't want what was happening to me, but physiologically there was a response going on that I couldn't control. She says it's an instinctual response, and that's what has to be retrained. Hancock highly recommends seeking professional help from a licensed therapist to retrain your brain. The trauma endured from someone you love is so severe that most people have no practical experience with it, and they can't help you with the skills you need. Your friends aren't going to be adequate. They're well-meaning, But there are coping skills you need to learn, and only a professional can help you learn them. It won't be an easy or a fast fix either. It took Hancock about 2 years to get past her triggers. Hancock says, you're stuck in the fear cage that was created for you from the trauma. She says, you're going to have to work like hell to get out of it, and it's going to take months to get over the bulk of it. And she adds, and even then, it'll take continued practice. But she says survivors shouldn't shy away from seeking help. People think it's just something that they have to live with. If you have a broken arm, you don't just live with the deformity. There are ways to fix how your abuser trained your brain. Hancock says, for me, asking for help meant acknowledging that I was a victim, and that, she says, was the hardest part. But I wouldn't have my life today if I didn't seek professional help, she added. Many insurance plans and employers offer coverage for mental health visits. Ask your doctor or victim's advocate for a referral to a therapist who specializes in domestic violence trauma. If you can't afford therapy, there may be some free and low-cost options near you. Taking care of yourself is imperative, and you can go from victim to survivor and then to overcomer. We have learned a lot of powerful things to help with our healing. With 62% of U.S. adults having at least one average childhood experience in trauma, and 25% having 3 or more, the question is not if you will encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is, what will you do when you do encounter them? You actually could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. Those who suffer violence need to know that those who love them and those who don't even know them will reach out and give them the help and the courage they need to leave before it's too late. Please, help us get these messages out. Subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, hit the like button, the notification bell, and please share these messages with others, because just by doing so, you could save a life. And if you are a victim of violence, listen to me. I want you to know that you are valued, you are loved, you are intelligent, and you are worthy. God does not want you to suffer violence. He wants you to live free from violence in peace and tranquility. There is a way out, and it is not your fault. Abuse is not love, and most of all, you are not alone. If you're a victim of violence, reach out to someone today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911 for help. And if you know of somebody suffering violence, tell the authorities. In our next episode, we're going to talk about identifying your trauma triggers. Until then, God bless you.